Okay, belt's back on and in position. Let me show you what I mean about putting it on loosely and making sure you start on the opposite the tensioner side. Now, you see it's seated up here. My timing marks have not moved. And then, you should look down in there. Let's see, it's around the idler. And that idler does not adjust, so it's not going to move now. It just bolts straight onto the block. I'll show you down here. Okay. If it'll focus. There's the new idler. There's the belt around it. There's the belt on the crankshaft pulley. As you can see, hopefully if I can get my right position in a good way. Okay, you can see my mark down here has not moved at all. Nothing has moved. It's now, see, it's a little bit loose on this side. That's the tensioner side. So yeah, if I do this right now, it should not throw any of the marks, even with the tensioner tightened against the belt. It should not move any of the marks away from where they're supposed to be. Let's do it. Okay, tensioner is back on. See it under there. Yeah, take a look at it here. Oh, okay. Sorry about the light situation. A little handheld deal. One of my overheads is burned out. Now then, this is an important step to this. This car uses one of these. This is like an old Volkswagen 4-cylinder. Uses a manually adjustable tensioner. I'll show you how this is going to work. Okay, here's the tensioner. This is the old one, and this is where it will be mounted to the engine. Belt running around it. Bolt through here. As you can see here, there's a hole positioned outside on the other side of where the bolt is to hold it on. So what you want to do is you want to take an Allen key that fits it and fit it in there. And then what you're going to do is you want to bolt this thing down to the engine so it's just snug, where you can just turn it without it, trying to spring back and do all that shit. I mean, it ain't spring loaded, but the belt, the belt's going to resist it getting into position. That's the whole idea behind tension. So you want to get that thing, and then when you want to get, crank it down a little bit, and then what you want to do, you have to kind of go back and forth between tightening the bolt. You crank it down, get some tension on the belt, and then crank that bolt down a little bit so it doesn't slip back out the other way. And you check your belt tension, cause you may have to do this a few times, because these belts have to be tensioned a certain amount. You do not tighten a timing belt on these. Let me be very careful saying this. You don't tighten the hell out of them. You don't tighten them as just as tight as you can get them, because if you do, it'll prematurely wear it and it'll fail. Plus, anytime a belt like this is too tight, it makes a really peculiar noise immediately. You'll hear it. You start the engine up and it'll go woo. I know that sounds funny, but it sings over here. People say something's singing. That's what it'll do. It'll make a noise right over here, and you'll know that's what it is, because you got it too tight. You can't have that, no more than you can have it too loose. So really the rule of thumb is, on the side of this belt that is does not have the tensioner on it, which means this side, forward side, headlight side, when it is properly tensioned by hand, you should just be able to barely, not even quite hardly, turn that belt halfway, get it halfway between that roller right there and the cam sprocket. With it properly tensioned, I'm going to try to say this very carefully, you should be able to grab the timing belt with your two fingers and just barely be able to turn it 90 degrees. So I'll show you that when I get this one tensioned correctly. Let's get at it. Okay, here's a shot of my tools and showing you what I'm doing. Have my ratchet over here. This is used to tighten this. This is a 14 socket, and then down in here you'll see my little let's see if I get a better shot at what I'm doing here. Hard to do here, but there it is mounted in, and what I do is I just kind of push down on this with my fingers. It didn't take much, just kind of, you know, don't reach that far like that, have your hand down in there, but just kind of push down on it, and it doesn't take a lot of force to do this. You can be up on this tension adjustment, you know, and past it before you know it. And when you think you got it set right, if it feels right to you, then go ahead and give this bolt a good snug. Now, be careful with your air conditioning lines and power steering lines. Try not to, you know, yank on those too much, but just get this thing snowed down. And when you're all done with this bolt's got to go to 40 foot-pounds of torque. So, but for now though, we're gonna just I'm gonna snug it down and check my tension, and if it looks good, I'm gonna go ahead and go from there. Okay, we got the tensioner torqued down to 40 foot-pounds of torque. Now what I want to do here is I'm going to just check my tension like I told you. Kind of get the light. I kind of fight this light a little bit, aren't I? Let's see here. Yeah, that's better, I guess. Okay, I'm going to get about right here. It's about halfway. So you can see it's not going quite 90 degrees here. You can see about how much deflection it has here. Now that's just guesstimate work. This takes trial and error. That's why this is kind of tricky sometimes for the new person doing this. But the good thing about this is, even with all the belts and everything back assembled, all the drive belts and all that back on this, with this cover off, I don't have it handy. I think I put it in the trunk. But there's you know, if you have the car, you'll know what I'm talking about. This cover that goes over this, you can leave it off to start it up and run it. And you know, if it sings, depending on what song it sings, I'm just kidding. Now, if it does, if it sits here and makes the noise I'm telling you about, and you will know that noise, it'll be making a noise it wasn't doing before, like just you know, just a groaning, whining noise. If it's doing that, then it's not a problem at all. Just to carefully retension this. You don't want to back this, flop it all the way off again. You know, you just want to barely undo your bolt just enough to be able to use the Allen key to get it backed up a little bit. You know, you'll get it. You know, you just gotta have it in your fingers there. So anyway, next thing we need to do after we've got that tensioner torqued down, and we think our belt is, you know, the correct tension, it's not banjo tightened, but it's not flopping around, is we need to double check our marks again and make sure that we did not yank one of the marks out of position. So let's look at it dead on here. Right there, that one's good. And this one is really tricky to see, but I've looked at it and you can see if I can get this back here, I can see the line through it facing it, so I know it's not moved. So that's why you always start the belt on the side that does not have the tensioner against it, because otherwise you have like I said a couple times, you run a risk of pulling the cam out of position and not knowing it. So when you it does that when you put the tension against it. It's hard to explain, but if you've ever done it, you'll know it. But now I'm telling you why it happened. Okay, the next thing you want to do after you get all this together to this step, now I've already got my crank bolt in here, so what I'm going to do is make sure that it's in park or the car's in neutral, and I'm going to rotate the engine by hand 2 complete revolutions. And you're not going to start it. You can do it with your wrench or whatever you're using, your prop, your bar, your ratchet, whatever you use. But do that, because what you want to do is that kind of also sets the belt a little bit, and it'll make sure that you got the tension where it needs to be. And another thing is you double check your marks again. So what you do is you're going to take your ratchet and you're going to turn this engine clockwise, the direction it normally runs in, 2 complete revolutions, and put the mark back where it is, right there, right where I have it there. I'm trying to get this so you can see. You've looked at it several times already. That's what you want to have it back on again, so then you're going to verify when this mark is where it's supposed to be, when it's lined up with that cast in protuberance, that this one is back where it's supposed to be. If that's the case and the belt still feels nice and tight, you're good to go. So all it'll be after that is just putting your belts, your crank pulleys back on. Well, that's the water, sorry about that. That's the crank pulley, and then water pump pulley, and the belts. Everything you took off just goes back together. So now I'm still thinking about how I'm going to approach this deal with tightening this crank pulley back up to the 180 190 foot-pounds of torque it's supposed to be on. That's kind of a tricky thing to do, but I've kind of got an advantage because this car is a manual transmission, and I can kind of block some things to keep it from turning easier. But we'll think of something. I'll sure film that when I get to it. So for now, I'm going to rotate my engine around a couple times and double check my marks, and if that looks good, I'm going to start throwing it back together, guys. Okay, everybody, sorry, I'm going to try to quit saying so much in my videos. Maybe I'll get over that one of these days. Alright, I rotate this engine around clockwise in the direction it normally runs, 2 complete revolutions. And now I've lined my mark back up again on the bottom. Try again to get a better view of that. Yeah, well, that's it right there. And then I went up top and checked the other mark up here, and it is spot on. So last thing I've done is just checking, sorry, let me get over here. Just giving this belt another check tension. It's seated a little bit, I think, a little bit more. Kind of, they kind of run in position. They position themselves on the pulleys. So, but it still feels good. I think that's gonna be just fine right there. So, anyway, we've got that torqued. We've got our idler pulley torqued. I cannot stress enough to be sure you've done this. And if you have to write yourself a note somewhere, be sure that thing is torqued down, because if it comes loose, it backs off, and that belt gets too loose, you ain't gonna catch it before it probably slips. So 40 foot-pounds of torque. Make sure it is done there like that. So, and on these, like I said, with this cover, you can take it off easily, so it's not going to be a bad idea every 10,000 miles or so, probably just to check this timing belt to make sure it's still the tension still feels good on it. Normally I don't like these kind of manual tensioners like that. I think it's kind of a catastrophe waiting to happen if you don't know what you're doing, but I guess they have their good points. So anyway, now it's just going to be a matter, like I told you a while ago, just putting the shield back on. Wherever I put that, I think it's on the back right there, but putting the bottom shield back on, and then putting the water pump pulley on, crank pulley back on. Make sure you put that dust cover behind the pulley, not in front of it. It goes like that. And start to put the belts back on. Easy enough. Hey everyone. I thought I'd show you this real quick. I said I would update it when I came up to a decision on how to get this crank bolt tightened back up on this Hyundai. What I did was I went ahead and just, of course, installed it. And I took my big, large wrench that I used to take my hitch on and off with, and I blocked the wheel up from turning with the lugs, and I put it in 5th gear, real tall overdrive gear, and put the emergency brakes on. And I got all the extensions I had to get my ratchet and everything out past the fender well, as you can see. And what I did was, you know, since it's so far out, if you don't brace it somehow, it's just going to pop off there when you try to put the weight on it, so to get it tight. So what I did was just went and got one of my jack stands, as you can see here, and put under it, and got my long cheater bar, which is also known as a jack handle, and put my whole weight on it. So it's, you know, I put so much weight. I weigh about 185 pounds, so I stood on it until it just, the extensions actually just flexed, twisted. So I don't think it's going to come off anytime soon. I'm going to do it again one more time just to make sure. But that's what I came up with to get it to work out. Now, if you got a car that's automatic, which a lot of these are, seems like people don't want to shift gears anymore. But if you got one that's automatic, this little trick with the wheel is not going to work, because there's no way it's not connected. You'll have to, you know, it's not connected with a clutch directly anymore, so you'll have to come up with some other idea to keep the flywheel from turning. It's got some holes in there, some slots, as you can see, so maybe you could wedge something solid in there, but you know, you just gotta be careful of doing that. It's tricky. I think you also, sometimes they just say use it like a flywheel lock, something in the flywheel. They make a thing called a flywheel lock, and that may be what you have to end up doing. But either way, you need to get this thing, make sure you got it on there and tight, because you don't want to lose that thing going down the road. It's your belts and everything come off with it. So anyway, hope that gave you some good ideas what to do here. So talk to you later. Okie dokie. She's done. See all the new belts doing their thing. Okay, everybody. All remains now just let it run a little bit, let the timing belt seat, and recheck the tension on it, make sure it's not flapping around, and just check everything over. Then we'll put the timing belt cover, which goes here back on, and the acoustic cover, and this job will be done. So if you have any questions, please be sure to ask me, and I'll do my very best to help you out. So hope you enjoyed the video. Please do some rating and commenting and subscribe. Thanks a lot.